is the I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast. Live.
You down with Rapaport? Yes, I am. 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 You better tune in, IamRapaport.com. Cause every single podcast, you know he drops bombs. I seen him on set, a seasoned vet with true talent. Catch him on his way to CrossFit, rocking the New Balance. He asked me to do the track cause he know I rhyme elite. But I'm just waiting for the Robert De Niro line of the week. Breakfast of Champions, hosted bagel, cream cheese, and lox. This is I Am Rapaport, the show never stops. We might catch him out in public, stretching his knees. But if you don't listen to the show, yo, wig up please. Wig up please. This is the
I Am Rapaport Podcast.
All right, so on today's episode, I get to interview fantasy football guru Cory Albertson, who literally has made millions of dollars playing fantasy sports. In one week, he won $1.5 million one day. He's won, he's lost. He's very interesting, very, very informative about all fantasy sports. I'm going to interview him. And this was a not an emergency podcast, but an impromptu podcast because we're coming out usually on a day we don't come out. But I have to announce that the TV show that I did, Public Morals, has been canceled. It's only going to be one season, unfortunately. This is the name of the game. This is the way of the world. This is the way show business works. So all the people that have supported and enjoyed Public Morals, and there's been a bunch of people that have tweeted about it and Instagrammed and emailed us at IamRapaportPodcast.com about Public Morals. Unfortunately, we're not coming back. It's disappointing. The show was executive produced by Steven Spielberg and created by Ed Burns. 1960s cop show. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But it's disappointing. I found out earlier today, and it's never fun. The cast was great work environment, great scripts. But I just wanted to directly let people know that was going on in my little world. And they cancel the shows. The thing that's always interesting about shows getting canceled, and probably you're like, well, why does it happen? And I'll tell people the short answer: it's politics, and that's exactly what it is. Because they cancel many shows each year, yet the same people doing the advertising continue to work there, and the same people doing the branding and the posters and the people that are doing the scheduling, they stay. I mean, they get fired, and essentially, because when a show gets taken off the air, I just use that word fire. You're essentially getting fired. You're like, oh, it's canceled. You're fired. As an actor and in show business, you're technically ejected. The show's not coming back because it didn't do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to be in a relationship with you because X, Y, and Z. It could be your breath stinks. It could be your fuck style's not buck wild. It could be you're an asshole. It could be any things. So anyway, I'm bummed about that. And I'm bummed because that's not a term that I normally use. I'm fucking pissed off about it. I'm disappointed that Public Morals got canceled. So, that whole, you mad, bro? Yeah, I'm fucking mad. I'll get over it. But I'm fucking mad. So you're not going to mad shame me about. Now you're going to say, well, it's not the end of the world. Of course it's not the end of the world. People are going through way worse things. I get that and I respect that. But I'm just saying immediately the way I feel about it, I'm like, yo, shit is whack. I don't like it. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed with the way it went down. I'm disappointed that it went down. How can a show executive produced by Steven Spielberg not get picked up for a second season? That shit right there doesn't make any sense. Steven Spielberg has a track record, a really rich, thorough track record.
Whoa.
So the fact, that's like saying, oh yeah, Mercedes-Benz isn't up to snuff. Like the new high-end Mercedes-Benz isn't up. Really? It's a Mercedes-Benz.
Now, as a fan, I'm a fan. So, is it only ratings that will prompt them to say not enough people are watching?
Ratings are number one.
So, is that why?
It could be ratings. It could be some shows have fair ratings, and they want to replace it with a show that is produced in-house. For instance, Fox Studios is separate from Fox Productions. So a show could be on, like, separate from Fox Network. So a show could be produced by Fox and on HBO.
Oh.
But the ideal thing, the most lucrative thing, is a show produced at Fox Studios for the Fox Network. So all the money's in-house. So let's say there's a show that's all Fox everything, and it's about a black guy and a white guy that do a podcast. And it's all Fox everything. And let's say there's a show that's about a black guy and a white guy that do a podcast, and it's produced by Sony Studios, but at the Fox Network. Whether they admit it or not, they're going to consider the show that's all Fox everything first, because you get all the money off of that. So if the all Fox everything show about a white guy and a black guy that do the podcast, let's say the Ian Rapaport podcast show for Fox, that would be dope.
Of course.
That's just an idea. I just came up with that off the cuff. They're going to lean towards picking that show up. So it's not always ratings, it's critics, it's awards. I mean, some shows, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It got canceled after the first season and then started winning, and it won Emmys that year.
Wow.
So you never know. But the reality of it is, I mean, and we could go into that in more detail, and we will go into that. The reality is, I'm disappointed that Public Morals got canceled. It was a great run. You know, the show is on TNT.com. You could check it out. Coming right up after this, I'm going to be interviewing this fantasy freak guru, gambling college graduate, my man Cory Albertson. All right, the Ian Rapaport podcast is sponsored by Casper mattresses. We love our Casper mattresses at the Ian Rapaport podcast. Casper Mattress is an award-winning mattress company that makes the most ridiculously relaxing, supportive mattresses sold directly to the consumers. Trust me, I sleep on one every night. The Casper mattress is available in 6 sizes and has a 10-year full warranty. 10 fucking years. It's made and stitched right here in the United States. Free 2 to 5 day shipping in the United States and Canada. And in New York City, you could get it the day of. The guy will drive up with your mattress in a box and deliver it right to your fucking house. And if you do not like it, you have 100 nights to sleep on this mattress for free. If you do not like it, they will refund. They will come pick up your mattress for free. 100 nights. Go to Casper.com and save $50 using the promo code Rapaport. RAPAPORT. Casper mattresses. We love them. All right. This is the I Am Rapaport podcast, and I don't want to call this an emergency podcast. I don't feel like it deserves the emergency, but it is fantasy football playoff time, and things are getting tight. So I have a guest, a special guest. Would you be considered a guru? My guest is Cory Albertson, and I met Cory because I narrated a documentary all about fantasy football that Cory was featured in. And then we talked to him. The first thing about Cory is that I don't think you look like the typical fantasy football player. All right, so for people that don't know you, which is probably 99.9% of the people that are listening to the Ian Rapaport podcast, because there's millions of us.
Yeah, I'll take the over.
Yeah. Take the over on that. Tell people who you are, what you do, and what's your relationship to fantasy football. And you could just...
Sure. So my name's Cory Albertson. Like Mr. Rapaport eloquently described, I got to be in a documentary about people who make money playing fantasy football, which is something that I've been fortunate enough to do for about 4 years now. Probably many of you at least have heard of DraftKings and FanDuel, especially recently as they've kind of been in the news and stuff with a few, kind of bumps in the road. Anyway, I've played on sites like that for about 4 years and have, kind of started off small, but taken it really seriously and been able to make it into a career pretty much and say that I'm a fantasy sports professional. And
so you essentially, awesome. That's what you do to make money is fantasy sports.
For the last couple of years, yeah, that's what
that's fucking crazy.
It is.
And your background is what? Because you went to because if you obviously you can't see Cory because this is not a visual medium. But if you saw Cory walking on the street, you wouldn't think this is a professional fantasy sports guy. You're like a regular Joe. You have Cory almost looks like we could be brothers, but I mean he's straight laced. You're a regular Joe. Did you ever play sports growing up?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I was never that like athletic as a kid, so like I played in little league and stuff. But like the one year I tried football in 7th grade, I hated it. I hated getting tackled. It hurt, and so I quit. And like, but yeah, what would make me more of like a regular like fantasy sports guy? Like, would it be wearing a jersey instead of a
Well, it would be wearing
coat,
a jersey. It would be loud. It would be sweaty, and I just think that would be the sort of stereotypical image of it. Like on the fantasy sports. Well, first of all, as myself, like the thing that I love about fantasy sports is fantasy football, and I am currently in a bye week. In my Stern Show Fantasy Football League because I beat the fucking dog snot at a Fafafui, a.k.a. Baba Booey, a.k.a. Mama Monkey, during that. But I think people would think it's more like a, degenerate gambler sort of look. And you're a well-educated gentleman.
Yeah, I mean, semi-well-educated. I went to graduate school, so actually in the past couple of years, I got an MBA from the University of Notre Dame. Great experience, but I was really busy in those 2 years because I was also playing fantasy sports, like, all throughout the year, as much or more than like pretty much anyone. So it was like almost leading like 2 lives packed into one for a couple of years there. So yeah.
And how did you wind up getting sort of like realizing that this could be a career?
So I used to be a professional poker player, and I actually had moved to Playa del Carmen, Mexico in 2011 because online poker got shut down in the US. And I wasn't quite ready to just like transition out of that just because the government shut it down. So I knew a few other guys that like went down to the Caribbean coast of Mexico, and I spent a little time there. And while I was there, I was introduced to daily fantasy by a friend of mine named Taylor. He started a site called draftday.com, which he's since sold. And I just looked at it and I was like, maybe if you were like good at like using these like salary dollars that they give you to draft your team, like if you could figure out how to like predict how the athletes will perform, I mean, it can become somewhat of a reasonably simple math problem, right? And so I just started treating it like that and used like, spreadsheets and numbers to basically optimize how to like play on daily fantasy sites.
And then the whole so that's sort of like the whole algorithm that people talk about, like the algorithm of fantasy sports. Like what is that? Because that's a term that I hear a lot, like the algorithms. Like some people say, and we'll get into is it gambling? Is it skill? Is it betting? Because that's where the controversy lies. But just in terms of like they talk about in the documentary, about the algorithms, and you sort of created like you're not just going, well, I'm going to pick Cam Newton because he's my favorite player. Like there's more of a mathematic thing in it, but at the end of the day, it's luck. It's luck on how the players do. They're all professional athletes. Anybody can have a good day on any given Sunday, no pun intended. But like, talk to me about the skill that's involved in how you approach fantasy sports from a more cerebral.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we'll talk about the algo. Can I say a couple things first, though?
Oh, you could say whatever you want.
All right. I met Mr. Rapaport here in like week 1 of this NFL season for the premiere of this documentary that he described. And, we kind of started texting back and forth. And so I've been, just kind of like keeping a watchful eye over his like, basically, let's say dominance, right? Of the
dominance. Yeah, that's
league.
a good word.
Yeah, it's a good, what's the right word for it?
That's a good word. Takeover.
Yeah, so.
Intrusion. Talk to me about the algos. I like that term algo. That's like some real scientific stuff. So talk to me about the algorithms. And just right off the bat, how do you break down a daily fantasy game? Like what do you use as someone who's what's the most you've ever won in a fantasy week? Like or in a contest?
Close to $1.5 million in a week of NFL last year.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You won close of $1 million.
Yeah, there was a scene in Living the Fantasy
I know.
showing this. You narrated it.
I
so
know,
you've seen it more than anyone.
The people don't know though. You won $1.5 million.
Yeah,
that's crazy, man. Nobody knows where we are. Nobody knows where the gloom thing. You're not going to get robbed when you leave the studio. That's incredible.
I don't know.
Were you tripping out? Were you tripping out when you won that money? Like when you were actually like, yo, I'm playing fantasy sports. I don't even, let's just say, I can't even throw a perfect spiral, yet I won $1.5 million.
Yeah, that's essentially true. It's pretty surreal. Like, I had partnered up with a friend of mine named Ray, and we've been playing in these games for like 4 years now. So, going into that night, which is a little over a year ago now, we just like we'd been like kind of like had a few other chances of winning like $1 million in one day. That was just like maybe the best chance to date, and we really felt like we were due. Like it was our time. Like, come on, like when is this? Let's let the other shoe drop, and like we want to be the ones that actually win at this time. And it was just one of those like perfect nights of Monday Night Football where everything came together, and it was just it was great. It was dreamlike. There was very little stress to it actually.
Have you ever met like because in that game wasn't Le'Veon Bell a part of that? Did you ever meet like any of these players that sort of, because Le'Veon Bell essentially won you $1.5 million?
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's absolutely right. And if you watch Living the Fantasy, you see that story kind of unfold in one of the scenes. And I've always thought like I would never want to nag Le'Veon Bell, like because he's
I
got
think
his
he
own
would
thing going on.
appreciate that
But,
though.
Yeah, if I ever had a chance to shake hands and like share like a 2-minute like story, I would like, or even a chance to show him that scene from Living the Fantasy, he probably would think it's cool.
If I won $15 because of Le'Veon Bell, I would tell him. But like winning $1.5 million because of any fantasy football player, that's like, I'm sure they'd be flattered, like, oh shit, and then they'd probably want to cut.
Well, that's an interesting angle, but he had an amazing season last year, so he won a lot of people, I think, a lot, and I think he knows that too, because he was campaigning pretty hard on Twitter to be thought of as like the fantasy player of the year. There's some award giving out for that. Yeah. I think they might have given it to Jamal Charles instead, maybe. But
Le'Veon was the guy.
But did he get it?
I don't know if he got it. But I mean, he definitely helped me last year.
Oh, he was amazing. Yeah.
So all right. So going into the playoffs, going into this season. So let me just ask you. So how do you approach week to week fantasy? How do you approach daily fantasy? Talk to me about your technique and what your thought process is, and what about the algorithms and like the computers and the numbers and statistics of it all. And number one, you don't get emotionally involved when you're voting for fantasy, when you're picking your lineup, right? It's not like, I love this guy. Is it instinct? Is it gut? Like, what is it?
I get emotionally involved, but I kind of let the algorithms, since we've established that as the word to use, I guess, like I kind of let the data, the algorithm supply, like mostly how I feel about the picks. But then like, within that, like there's still a lot of subjectivity and actual like daily fantasy strategy where you have to think about like, okay, who's going to be like a popular guy and who's going to be a guy that isn't really picked at all. And if you're trying to beat, let's say 100,000 other people in a contest, having a player have a really great day that like you were one of the only few people to draft him is like, you need that to happen. It's like the best thing that can happen. So, not only is like predicting how the athletes are going to perform part of the equation, but you also have to try to predict how popular they're going to be in the fantasy games that you're picking them in.
Why? Because in the daily fantasy games, if everybody picks, let's say, for instance, Tom Brady as their quarterback, does his value go down, or everybody has a chance to win? Like, what does that have to do with it?
You seem to understand it. It's just like his value goes down because like let's just say like hypothetical extreme, 100% of the players in the field draft Tom Brady.
Right.
Whether he breaks his ankle in the first play or throws 7 touchdowns, you don't care in the context of the fantasy contest because it didn't affect you either way, right? So you need like the opposite of that would be no one has Tom Brady except for you. Now suddenly when he throws 7 touchdowns,
you're getting those
Rapaport's
points
at the top and everyone else is like looking up thinking, dang, I should have taken Brady. So it's important to think about that,
Okay, and then this word algorithms, which is a new word for me. I mean, I heard it when I was in the 10th grade. I didn't pay attention to it. And I honestly haven't heard it so much and used it so much until I started getting involved with fantasy football. So what is an algorithm in terms of fantasy sports, particularly fantasy football? What does that mean?
Yeah, so you're trying to put a number of variables into a spreadsheet to help you analyze how to
Such
draft
as what?
players. All right, let's go over the very, very basic. First, you need their name. Second, you need their position. Third, you need the team they play for. You might be able to get away with not having that. Let's just say you need name, you need position, you need their salary on the site that you're playing on, whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings. Then lastly, you need some kind of prediction for how many fantasy points they're going to score that weekend. Now, that gets to be a complex problem. There are ways that you can kind of like use a different heuristic or kind of like patch your way to a solution. But
wait. What was the word you just said? What?
Heuristic. Just kind of
never heard that word in my life, Cory, and I like it. And I like that I never heard it. And don't be surprised that I never heard it. I guarantee you, there's people listening to the I Am Rapaport podcast. How do you even spell that? Heuristic?
I'm not good at spelling. I think it's HUERISTIC.
How do you say heuristic?
Heuristic. It just means like kind of like a guide or a reference for. So like if you could just find like one website that tells you like something about what to expect for fantasy players, that would be like a heuristic for making your decisions. And I might not even be using the word right, but anyway. So like
You're probably using it right, and be proud of it. Be proud of the fact that you have a better education than me, Cory. Don't be ashamed of it. Go ahead. So go ahead.
First of all, I don't believe that that's true at all. I mean, you've been in Hollywood acting for like 3 decades now. I think your
Doesn't
education
make you that smart. Trust me.
but your street smart's
Street
far outweigh
smart.
what
I got
have.
a lot of street
We should
smarts
really be
and street
talking
cred.
about you. But anyway,
no. Go ahead.
So you have let's say Devonta Freeman is
Right.
$10,000 to draft him on FanDuel,
Right.
And you expect he's going to score 20 FanDuel points. Behold, you have yourself a ratio right there, right? So you want to create that ratio for kind of every player across the board and analyze, okay, who are the ones that seem to be good value for your money, and who are the ones that maybe I should avoid? And that's kind of like the foundation of what we might call an algo in this context.
Okay, that makes sense. And then in terms of like, have you and your partner created your own algorithms? Like, where's the best source of information? Like there's so many websites and there's so many quote unquote fantasy gurus. There's so many fantasy experts. Are you considered like a fantasy expert? Like, have you guys created your own thing?
No, Ray and I have always stayed away from trying to shill or picks or whatever. Like, it just seems like whatever the business model is for doing that, it never made any sense to us, because if you really believe that you have this fantastic info, the best thing to do, at least up until now, in my opinion, has been to hoard that info and just play daily fantasy with it, rather than try to sell it to people for $29.99 or whatever, right? So we've always been let's just keep the info. We don't need to be out there touting ourselves. And okay. So in terms of you kind of asked about how is it made, and I would say there's proprietary elements and also just kind of research based elements where we're relying on other people's work. And it's ultimately, at the end of the day, what is making a fantasy baseball algorithm? It's knowing what data to organize, how to organize it, and how to use it, right? So ultimately, it's a data organization problem, I think. But for instance, one of the things that I'm trying to figure out and improve as a fantasy player, this is a real thing, but you get so nuts when it comes to fantasy, but it is true, improving, as far as defenses, picking defenses and figuring out what's the best defense. How do you pick a defense? Obviously, just so people that don't know, the weekly fantasy football, which is what I play in, which you hear me talk about in the Stern Show. It's a season-long thing. So I make my picks, and then it's 16 weeks. Daily is every Sunday or every top of the week, because you could play Thursday. You could play you can't play just Thursday, right? Yeah, you have to have 2 or more games in real life.
Okay, so every Sunday there's daily picks, but you need to pick a defense. And one of the things that I'm learning, trying to figure out, is how do you pick the best defense? That's a question I have. How do you pick the best defense?
If I knew the answer to that, I would love to tell you.
Toss? You hedge your bet, right? You try to get the best you can.
There are definitely and let's just stick with the daily fantasy context, since that's what I'm most familiar with. Although I do play season long, as you mentioned as well. There's just a lot of variance to how a defense is going to perform in any given week. So you might have a theory on that, these ones are better than these other ones, but any given week, you should totally expect that your favorite defense is not going to actually be the one that scores the most points. So it's kind of a riddle. Defenses are a pretty variable position in that way, maybe more so than wide receivers are.
Right.
Yeah.
And then as far as drafting, when you approach a draft, so when you're playing your daily fantasy, explain what the lineup is. It's not your traditional thing. It's one quarterback. Articulate what it is.
So you draft, depending on the site, let's just keep it kind of simple. You draft one quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a defense. That would be an example of a team, and you're given let's say 50,000. You can join a contest, right? You can join a contest anywhere from no money on the line at all, you're just playing for fun, all the way up to contests where it's $5,000 to buy in, right? And and everything in between that you can imagine, against just one other person, Mr. Rapaport and I could play heads up, or it would just be hundreds of thousands of people, So you choose your contest, and then you're given a fixed amount of salary money. So it's kind of arbitrary. It just depends on the site. They might give you $50,000 in salary money, and then you look at the players, and each player has a price associated with them. And usually, of course, the best players like Tom Brady or Julio Jones or whatever are going to have the highest price tags. And the name of the game becomes finding how do I find kind of value here? How do I find a diamond in the rough that's going to do a lot for really cheap?
And how do you break that down? Like, so this week, how have you been successful? Like, what this season, have you been successful? Like, what's your biggest? Are you allowed to say what your biggest win is, or it's public, right?
Well, no, it's not public. Definitely not. I mean, maybe there are some sites that try to estimate it, but I don't know that any of them are doing it really well. I think, biggest win this year, maybe in any given week, was like probably about I don't know. I think like 300,000, but which was great. That was great. But let's take it into the grand context, which is that I've had weeks where Ray and I lost that much money, right? And so,
holy crap,
yeah. So we you kind of have to look at the whole season as an aggregate. And right now we've had an okay season, like we're in the black or the green or whatever you call it,
right.
But it hasn't been exactly like over the moon outstanding or anything yet. So I live in San Francisco, but I'm in Southern California for this weekend, going to San Diego tomorrow for the FanDuel Fantasy Football World Championships.
And explain what that is and what's at stake. What's at stake?
So you have to qualify for it, as 120 people have. 5 of those 120 lineups, I should have said, are I have them. Ray of Hope. We won those seats, right? So over the course of the season, you have to win a qualifier to get to the San Diego event. And then out of the 120 competitors this weekend, first place gets $3 million, I think. And
whoa. One person is going to win $3 million?
Yeah, or conceivably more if they have a lineup that finishes, first and second or something like that.
Yo, wait, and is it only one person that will win? Like, it's only first place can only go to one person?
No, so great question. There's 120 prizes, so every spot pays something. I think it goes like 3 million, 1.5 million, 1 million, and then down from there, down to like 20,000 for 120th.
Holy crap. So have you placed your lineups this week?
No, I mean, as we're recording this, it's only Thursday afternoon. So this is just like after we finish up here, I'll just kind of start to do like research for the week, honestly. I don't do a whole lot on like Monday through Wednesday. So it'll be like kind of a weekend long process of just, working on lineups. And let's think about the total prize pool for this contest divided by the 120 seats. Every entry is worth like $100,000 in value, right? Like, you might only get 20,000 for it, or you could turn it into 3 million. But if you think of it as like, what is the seat worth? It's worth 100,000, and we have 5 of them. So it's almost like putting $500,000 on the line. So you want to make sure that you
your team has five
yeah,
seats?
Yeah.
Holy cow, man. That's crazy, man.
Well, we've been lucky on FanDuel with winning seats this year. DraftKings has been kind of the opposite. We've, I think, been fulfilling the dreams of some others along the way. But
what do you mean? What do you mean?
Like, we've won 2 seats on DraftKings, but up until last week, we'd only won 1. And definitely at that point in time, like, we had paid more buy-ins and qualifiers than 1 seat was even worth.
Right.
Like maybe we had 1 seat, which I think is worth like 80,000, but we had done like 130,000 in qualifiers.
Holy crap.
Yeah. I mean, that's just an estimate. I don't know exactly, but.
The Iron Rapaport podcast is sponsored by Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon is a New York City-based company that lives and breathes New York. They make the best underwear, the best t-shirts, the best socks at Mack Weldon. They use great, soft, comfortable, breathable material. It's light. The fabric is great. You could shop online or on your mobile phone and check out in less than a minute. Mack Weldon wants you to be comfortable and look good. It's perfect for the guy going for a run or the guy on the run. Use the promo code Rapaport, RAPAPORT, for 20% off. You get 20% off your Mack Weldon underwear, socks, and t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts. Check it out, Mack Weldon, MackWeldon. All right, so explain to me and the people what is going on, the controversy with fantasy sports. For me, it would be like I don't gamble, and I play daily fantasy on DraftKings, and I play daily fantasy on FanDuel. Thanks to you, you got me involved with that, and I haven't had that much success. It's been hard for me to sort of double dip with the mentality that it takes for my season long thing. But there's a controversy that's going on where the whole fantasy sports in general may not exist anymore, right?
Wrong. I don't think that's truly a risk. You said it. That was a good segue to kind of talking about some of the controversies that have come up with the daily fantasy operators over the course of this football season. It's very complicated. It's been kind of complex, and there's been a lot of storylines with it. But just to kind of summarize it, I would say that that daily fantasy really hit the mainstream consciousness this football season because of, one reason in particular, and that was the advertising.
They went crazy.
They went crazy. Like every other ad on TV was for daily fantasy. And what I think that did was it brought a lot of eyeballs into a space that maybe wasn't quite ready for a lot of scrutiny yet. And then what happened is you kind of have this spark that goes off, which, was almost like this just unfortunate coincidence of this poor guy at DraftKings released some data on the internet. He works there. He released some data that he wasn't supposed to release a little too early on a Sunday. And lo and behold, that weekend, he won a bunch of money playing on the rival site FanDuel. This was at a time where employees were allowed to play daily fantasy on other sites. Because of this incident, they're no longer allowed to do that. But at the time, the media kind of like saw the story and they're like, wait, so this guy had access to this insider data, which he accidentally released early. And then on the same weekend, he wins a ton of money in playing on FanDuel. People made a connection there between those two events, and that kind of triggered a controversy, right? Because
it was sort of like insider trading.
Yeah, the perception was like, holy cow, like something shady is going on here, right? The reality is that the young man, Ethan Haskell, to the best of anyone's knowledge, and there was even an investigation, wasn't doing anything wrong. He was like truly just an accident that he published the data. Independent of having access to that data, he did well on FanDuel that weekend, but it didn't matter because all that mattered was what people thought happened, and it looked really bad.
Right. And then so then what happened? Then what proceeded to happen?
There was kind of just a domino effect after that of, quite a few different dominoes, but where it's kind of gotten most interesting would be the New York State Attorney General who, kind of jumped into the media headlines for himself. And I think, I'm not a lawyer, but I think the gist of it is that he sent a cease and desist letter to the site saying, like, you're no longer allowed to operate in New York because this is like illegal gambling. It goes against New York laws. And, now they're battling in the courts. I think FanDuel actually already left New York. I don't believe DraftKings has yet. And they're kind of like waiting for this like verdict from a judge on like which side is going to win here, the fantasy side or the attorney general. And
what do you think is going to happen? And what is your involvement? And what isn't one of the questions of the main things? Is it a game of skill or is it a game of luck?
Yeah.
And break down like what that means and what you think it means and like what your just opinion of it is.
Yeah. First of all, I have no idea what's going to happen with the ruling in New York. I mean, it's in my mind, it's a coin flip, so I'm eager to find out.
But it could potentially be shut down in New York, online. But how does that even work? If it's online gambling, you can't do it from New York. Or like, how does that even work?
Yeah, I mean, I was in New York over Thanksgiving, and I kind of like remembered while I was there. I was like, oh yeah, I can't play on FanDuel from here. It got pretty real at that moment because, unless you're in New York, it actually doesn't affect you.
You mean your computer won't work?
Yeah, like they know they have geolocation software, and so they just like they know what state
you can't place your
they'll
bets.
tell you like you can't do whatever.
Wow,
yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, you had another question.
No, about like luck, skill,
okay,
and that whole thing in
right.
terms of fantasy sports.
Yeah, thanks. So it's like, these questions are kind of annoying because people think of them as if it's like a binary thing, like it's one or the other.
Right.
It couldn't possibly be something in between.
Right.
So people are like, is it a game of skill or a game of chance? The answer is, the black and white answer is that it's a game of skill, but yes, there are elements of chance, and certainly on any given weekend, even any given season, I would say there are huge elements of chance. Just like this weekend in San Diego, like someone's going to win $3 million, and who knows who it will be, right? So there's chance involved in the game, but it is a game of skill. People say, is it gambling, and it's like, gambling is not like, it's not like is this a zebra, yes or no? Like there's a right answer to that question, right?
Right.
When you say, is this gambling? It's not like that, like black and white, right? It's like, it's a form of gambling. Yes. Like if you want to use that word, fine, but you shouldn't think of this question as being particularly important.
Right.
Because you can't just say yes or no. What you should try to do is understand really what the game is. How is it different? How is it managed? What needs to be changed about it? And like, don't get hung up on the, like, is it gambling question that people do.
But like if it is gambling, what is the I didn't say again, like, because I don't gamble, like, I play blackjack every now and then, but if it is gambling, so what? If people want to do it, like, what are the laws? Like, why is this becoming a whole thing? Like, I don't understand, like, why this is such a major controversy. Like, what is the major controversy? Is it just like, yo, the New York State's attorney, here's a bag of money, and like, are they just not getting the kickback they want? Like, what is the deal with it?
I don't know, man. I mean, you'd have to like talk to the cynics about that one. I think like certainly money is like an element here, right? Like California is having a hearing next week that I'm actually going to be testifying at on kind of on behalf of like a what's called the DFS Players organization. And anyway, like, you know, I think why is it happening like this? Like, why can't people just play in these games? Like, yes, it's true that kind of like libertarian mindset is like what would be most optimal. But you know, the reality is that you have people whose jobs it is to make sure that there are consumer protections, to make sure people aren't getting ripped off or like, you know, falling into like problem gambling habits. And so
they're trying not to create degenerate gamblers who are throwing away their entire lives, wind up under the bottom of a building somewhere and all this kind of thing.
Yeah. It's just kind of inevitable that if you have businesses that are like, at least like largely resemble a online gaming or online betting company, you know, maybe they're not exactly that, but they at least kind of seem like maybe they are, right? It's just like inevitable that there's going to be some like politicians or lawyers or someone who wants to like take a closer look at it, right? And I think that we're at that tipping point for daily fantasy. Maybe the industry wasn't quite prepared for it, maybe kind of a little overconfident, thought maybe that day would never come, but it did. It's here, and you know, they need to work their way through it. I think everyone does as an industry the best that they can, and hopefully coming on the other side where, you know, there are like sane, common sense regulations around this space, but nothing that prevents people from playing.
All right, now the I Am Rapaport podcast it has been bestowed. It's the only podcast that now has championship rings because the I Am Rapaport podcast is the champion of all podcasts. Officialfantasyrings.com. They made customized I Am Rapaport podcast championship rings. Have you ever wanted a customized fantasy sports ring? Have you got one yet?
My season league has a trophy, but I don't have a ring yet.
No. You need a ring. They look and feel like real championship rings. All right, and it's a great incentive for winners and losers. I mean, you're Cory Albertson. You're like a real fantasy dude. You need a ring. You won $1.5 million. Like the winner of the $3 million this week should have a championship ring.
I think there's like a belt, like kind of like a title belt.
No. It's fantasy sports championship rings, and these rings we got coming. Mine is customized for the I Am Rapaport podcast, and I actually handed out an official fantasy ring.com to Gorilla Fafafui from the Stern Show Fantasy League. But I strongly suggest that in your season-long fantasy or your weekly fantasy, or these people that are playing for millions of dollars, they go to officialrings.com and check it out because you'll feel like the champion that you are. And also, it could be for a winner or a loser. You know, because a loser could wear a ring saying, I'm a loser, asshole. I lost this. And you have to wear it until the next season starts. Any way you want to do it, it works. But go to officialfantasyrings.com. Get your customized fantasy sports rings. They look and feel like the real thing. They're a lot of fun. They look good, and they're really cool.
I think you would want the font to be pretty big on that loser ring for it to have the intended effect. But I agree.
Yeah.
And you know what I also think? I think FanDuel and DraftKings, they should be getting on this site themselves and making sure that if whoever wins $3 million this week in San Diego should be getting one of these Rapaport rings, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Whoever wins the $3 million, that's the least of the things they should have. Like, they should get like one with real jewels. Like, mine looks and feels like the real thing. There's no real jewels in it, but if you win $3 million,
that might be worth like a chocolate diamond or something.
Do something in there. Do something in there. All right, so going into NBA, which NBA is my thing. Like, as much as I love NFL, intuitively and instinctively, I understand NBA better, and it's just something I've loved longer in my life. So you're now also participated in fantasy basketball. So break down in layman's terms how NBA fantasy, because I haven't started doing that because it seems too overwhelming to do like every single game. Was it weekly? Is it daily? How does it work? Break it down.
Yeah, you can play it daily, and like you, I love basketball. The NBA is my favorite pro sports league. I think it's maybe the greatest organization on earth. They're incredible. Fantasy basketball is like, first of all, I always take Rapaport in the Celebrity All-Star Game Fantasy League.
Thank you.
You have to.
As you should.
Yeah. I mean,
as you should.
You know he's going to back people down. And
as you should. And you know what? And that's actually a good thing, because going into the Celebrity Game 2016, I'm going to see if we could put that on the market as a fantasy game.
Yeah.
And then you could pick players, and it's going to be it's going to be in Canada, and there's some sniffing, there's some whispering that it might be a Canada versus the world. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm putting up numbers in that game.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just letting you know.
Who do they even have besides Bieber? I mean, there's no one that can defend you on that team.
Seth Rogen? What's he going to do?
Yeah.
Drake? If he decides to get out there, I'm telling you right now, And as far as fantasy sports, he's not putting up numbers. Bieber, I'd give because he's like a little Justin Bieber. I don't know if you ever seen him play. He's like a Canadian, like a wild rabid Canadian jackrabbit. Like a feral Canadian jackrabbit. So he might be someone to put up there. Like if he could be your point guard and then I'm your power forward, you're starting a good celebrity fantasy basketball game. But break down, basketball, how it works, NBA fantasy basketball.
By the way, this probably could really work, like pairing the celebrity All-Star game with the regular NBA All-Star game in a fantasy contest where you have to draft like 3 celebrities and 3 NBA players, and it's cumulative.
This is why I like where your head's at, Corey.
Yeah, we should talk to some folks about this.
This is why I like where your head's at. I like where your head's at. And then, like the celebrities, you can hedge that would be making a lot of fun. Making the celebrity game, it would be low stakes because it ain't going to be a lot of scoring. It'd be low stakes and low scoring. And, but I think that's a good idea for All-Star Weekend. But break down NBA basketball and how you wind up, going about it. So how many games have to be playing on a collective night for there to be daily NBA basketball? Fantasy.
Technically only 2. So the law that kind of has driven the fantasy growth so far says that there have to be multiple real world events. So you need at least 2 different real world NBA games on any given night. And if you have that, technically you're good to go on playing daily fantasy, where the model is kind of the same as what I described earlier for NFL. You have a certain amount of money and you draft players at different positions, and just like fantasy football, you kind of want to try to figure out like who are the best picks based on what I expect them to do.
And what are the stats? Obviously scoring, rebounding, assist, and what else? Because I heard it was like free throw percentages, free throw miss. How do you get to, like, is LeBron? He seems like he would be a good fantasy pick because he fills it up across the board.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron's the man. There's, DeMarcus Cousins is kind of like a fantasy god because he stuffs the stat sheet too.
So what are the stats that get played?
Yeah, so like it's pretty standard scoring. Like what are the stats that ever get talked about in basketball for the most part? It's pretty much like points, 3-pointers, assists, rebounds. What else am I missing? I mean, I'm probably missing like 1 or 2 stat lines here, blocks, steals, whatever else.
Okay.
But it's just the basic scoring. There's nothing like super complicated.
Okay.
Like it's a little bit harder to watch watch basketball with fantasy basketball in mind, because like with football, you got like 40 seconds between every play. You know exactly that you need Todd Gurley to score.
Right.
They're on the goal line. Like it's a very like kind of like there's a moment that what you're looking for. Baseball's the same way. When Mike Trout is coming up to bat. Right. Basketball, you don't know like when Steph Curry's about to pull up for a 3. The answer is probably like any second now, but like you still have to like watch.
3 or 3s 4 or
that's it. 3s or 4. Like it depends between the sites, but like some sites do like you get 3 for it plus a bonus point, which is obviously makes 3-point shooters like the greatest thing.
Right. And so who are some of the people? Obviously, like the regular Joe Schmoes. Like of course Steph Curry because of his 3-point prowess. Thompson, he had 10 threes the other night. Like so, Klay Thompson. So like, who are some of the other like lesser known going into NBA season this year that have emerged as good fantasy players besides the regular cast of characters of the LeBrons, DeMarcus, and Steph Curry? Like who are some of like give me some names?
Man, I'm gonna have to like plead stupidity on that because I don't really even start like focusing a lot on fantasy basketball until after football season ends because it's just like
it's too much.
Yeah, it's like you could do it all, but I don't know. I haven't like looked at fantasy basketball like every single day to like, and it's only been going on for a couple weeks or like 4 weeks or whatever. So I don't have like a ton of confidence in like giving you like answers I would feel good about putting out there to a million listeners. But
it's millions,
probably millions,
millions of listeners.
Or do we say billions or millions?
Just you could say millions of listeners.
Right.
You don't have to say billions. That'd be exaggerating. But millions is it's like tens of millions. You could say that. It depends on a weekly thing. I think that with you and we're discussing, it might be in the tens of millions this week. Yeah. So you could say the tens of millions of listeners. Wait, let me take a break. Hold on one second. Yo, the I Am Rapaport podcast is proudly sponsored by Greats Sneakers. Great Sneakers is the first sneaker brand directly made in Brooklyn, New York. Greats is a direct-to-consumer sneaker brand that is redefining the sneaker business. They eliminate the middleman to save the customer money by selling to you at greats.com. Guys like Marshawn Lynch, Beast Mode. We're talking fantasy sports. We're talking fantasy football. Beast Mode has the Beast Mode sneaker at greats.com. Kevin Durant also endorses Great Sneakers. Just if you want to go to greats.com, if you want to buy a present for somebody over the holiday seasons, trust me, go to greats.com. You could use the promo code RAP, R-A-P, and save 20% off Anytime you go to greats.com and buy sneakers, trust me, they're nicely made, they're comfortable, they eliminate the middleman. Forget the middleman. Who needs the middleman? Saves the customer money by selling to you directly at greats.com. All right, so Cory, I need you to give me some tips. I feel like you're scared to make some premonitions and some observations. I need you sound smart, you look smart, you look clean, you look lean and mean. You won $1.5 million. You're playing for $3 million this week. Give the listeners some tips here. Break it down. Give me some names. Give me some what do they call sleeper picks?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's tough, right?
Is sleeper picks like an overused thing? Is there such thing as a sleeper pick? I know I watched the show Homeland. They talk about sleeper cells. Like, give me something, man. Give me something. Like, you got now. Tom Brady versus Houston. I wouldn't go with Tom Brady. I'm scared of that. If I wouldn't pick Tom Brady.
Yeah, no, and you shouldn't. Like right now, we're looking at a site called Fantasy Aces, which is actually based here in Los Angeles. They're not the biggest daily fantasy site, but they're like a pretty cool site, and we're just looking at their games. So it depends on the site's salary, right? Like some sites maybe like drafting Tom Brady would be good, and others it might be bad, depending on what that ratio is that we discussed earlier. This week on Fantasy Aces as an example, like D'Angelo Williams, like running back of the Steelers, like he's kind of an awesome pick because he's like. They haven't priced him yet at the very top of their price tier, and he's basically like a top elite running back now.
He's doing very well.
He's doing very well. And then like for quarterbacks, like Cam Newton, for a guy that's just gonna like be like a great pick, but that like lots of other people are gonna have him. And then like Tyrod Taylor to Buffalo Bills for like someone that's like, if you want to talk sleeper, like Tyrod Taylor's like usually he's like always asleep. Not always, but most weeks, people don't tend to draft him, right?
He puts up numbers.
He puts up numbers. He can run the ball. Running is worth a lot in fantasy. So yeah.
So like, and what do you think about like Russell Wilson? Like his fantasy numbers have gone up because he's not turning the ball over. He runs. He gets a lot of points, and they like Seattle is starting to go up. Like they're starting to come together. So Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
So out of the picks here, like out of Tom Brady, Drew Brees had a good week last week going against Tampa Bay. Like how do you make these premonitions? Like what do you think about this?
Premonition seems like a polite way of putting it, but it's more just like, like I said, like you do the research, you kind of come up with like, just like, what to expect, right? So you want to look like who's overrated and who's underrated. Oftentimes, like the top price guys, like especially at the quarterback position, in my mind, can be kind of overrated. So like Tom Brady, Drew Brees, like these are guys that maybe on average I don't usually like nearly as much as I like like Tyrod Taylor, like who we discussed, or Jameis Winston even has had a couple of good weeks.
Jameis has done good.
So like he started off terrible, but he's had some like
he's figured
moments.
it out.
So it depends on the week, it depends on the matchup, and
explain to like the people the difference between a flex and a tight end, and who would you pick for your flex on this site here, the Aces site?
Yeah, like so a flex just means like you can pick a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end, and
they're this quote unquote flexible.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it have now? Does that mean they're good at touching their toes?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that mean?
Extra points if they can touch 5 inches past their toes, but what it means. What it means really is it's a flexible like spot on your fantasy lineup, so you can take anyone of any position, just not a quarterback or a defense, and they kind of score differently than the other positions do.
Okay.
So this week, like a guy on Fantasy Aces that you'd like absolutely want to have, in my opinion, is David Johnson.
Okay.
And
why?
He's just like really cheap because he just got thrust into the role of the starter recently. And some of these sites, they don't always update their like salaries like right away for players. So if there's a guy that like just is going to start for the first time because someone else got injured, like make sure you look for that guy on the daily fantasy site because his salary might be priced as if he's a backup,
David Johnson.
Yeah.
So that's a sleeper guy. That's a guy to check for this week.
He's not even a sleeper so much as he's just like a really valuable pick because he's cheap, but he's, people expect him to do well. So,
all right. See, that's what I'm talking about. Listen, my man right here is dressed sharp. He does this for a living. All right? He's not sweating. He's cool, calm, and collective. Yo, Cory, I got to go. I wish you tremendous luck this weekend. I feel like if you win the $3 million, you have to go to officialfantasyrings.com. You got to just splurge.
I'm going to do it anyway, man.
You deserve a ring.
Win or lose, I'm getting a ring.
Got to get yourself a ring. And I appreciate the time. I appreciate the insight. And, this is the Iron Rapaport podcast, and we're out. The Iron Rapaport podcast is sponsored by the American Giant Clothing Company, AmericanGiant.com. Go on there. Sweatshirts, rough, well-made, comfortable, breathable, warm. In the winter, you need yourself a nice American Giant zip-up hoodie or a pullover hoodie. American Giant. Go to AmericanGiant.com. Check out the t-shirts, the sweatshirts, the sweatpants. American Giant.